Some things don't fall apart all at once. They come undone the way a sweater does. One loose thread, one small pull, and before you know it, you're standing there holding nothing but a pile of yarn, wondering how you missed it. My wife and I built something real together. I know people say that, and it sounds like the kind of line you put on a greeting card, but I mean it in the most practical sense. We met at Ohio State during our junior year. She was in the same accounting seminar. I was failing. I wasn't failing because I was stupid. I was failing because I kept skipping to drive my roommate's band to gigs in Columbus on Thursday nights. She sat next to me one afternoon and slid her notes across the table without a word. I looked at her and she just shrugged and said, "You look like you need these more than I do." Her name was Becca, short for Rebecca, but she hated being called that. Said it sounded like a woman who runs a county fair quilting competition. She had a dry sense of humor that most people didn't catch the first time around. I caught it immediately. That was probably the beginning of the end of my freedom, and I didn't mind one bit. We dated through senior year, moved in together after graduation, and got married at 26 in her parents' backyard in Dayton on a Saturday in October, when the leaves were turning and her mother cried through the entire ceremony. I am not a sentimental man by nature. My father raised me to fix problems and keep moving. But I remember standing there watching Becca walk toward me in that dress thinking, this is the part of my life I am going to be most proud of. I work in industrial logistics. I know that sounds like something you'd fall asleep listening to, but there's a version of it that's genuinely interesting, at least to me. I coordinate freight operations for mid-sized manufacturing companies going through transitions, plant relocations, mergers, supply chain overhauls. Companies call me when things are broken and I come in and unbreak them. I've always been good at reading systems, figuring out where the blockage is, clearing it, moving on. My colleagues call me Hex, not because of anything mysterious, because my last name is Hexler, and because I have a habit of walking into a facility and identifying the bottleneck within the first 20 minutes of a walkthrough. Someone said once that I was like a hex wrench. You only need me when something specific is stuck. The name stuck instead. Becca built a career in financial consulting. She was sharp, organized, and genuinely good at making people feel like she was their ally even when she was delivering hard news. She worked mostly from home, had a dedicated client list of about 40 companies, and traveled maybe 6 or 8 times a year for on-site work. We had twin boys, Connor and Miles. Miles is a name on my do not use list apparently, so let me correct that. Connor and Ash. Twins. They're in college now at Indiana University. Good kids. Steady. Connor is more like me. Quiet, observational, methodical. Ash is more like his mother used to be. Charming, social, good in a room. I say used to be, because at some point, and I still can't pin down exactly when, Becca became someone I didn't fully recognize. It happened gradually. The kind of thing where you notice it in retrospect, but can't see it while it's happening because you're too close. She started going to the gym more, which I thought was great. She started having longer phone calls that she'd take in the other room, which I thought was work. She started being harder to reach when she was on her day trips to see clients, which I thought was just the nature of her job. She got a new perfume. She started caring about what she looked like before she left the house in a way she hadn't in years. Little things, all of them individually reasonable. Together they made a picture I didn't want to see. The thing that actually cracked it open wasn't dramatic. It was a fuel receipt. I drive a 10-year-old Silverado that I genuinely love. It's got 220,000 miles on it and it runs fine because I take care of it. Becca drives a red Audi A4 that she bought herself 2 years ago as a "I've earned this" purchase after landing a big contract. I don't begrudge her that. She did earn it. I just wish, looking back, that I'd paid more attention to how much she loved that car and why. One afternoon in March, I was cleaning out her car. She asked me to grab some files she'd left in the back seat, and I found a receipt from a gas station in Bloomington. Not our Bloomington. The one 2.5 hours south of us, near the Indiana-Kentucky border. She had told me that weekend she was visiting a client in Fort Wayne, which is 2 hours north in the opposite direction. I sat in the driveway for a long time with that receipt in my hand. I didn't say anything to her that evening. I put the receipt in my wallet, and I made dinner, and I watched TV, and I went to bed. But I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, running the logistics of it in my head, the way I'd run a broken supply chain, looking for the place where the inputs didn't match the outputs. Fort Wayne is north, Bloomington is south. Those two things don't coexist on the same trip unless something is wrong. Over the next couple of weeks, I started paying attention differently. I didn't snoop through her phone. I want to be clear about that. I didn't need to, I just watched. Becca was a creature of pattern the way all efficient people are, and once I started looking for deviations from the pattern, I found them. Her client dinners now seemed to land on specific days, usually Thursdays. She always came home from them a little flushed and a little too relaxed. The kind of relax that comes from more than wine. She'd started using a second email account on her laptop. I noticed the login toggle one afternoon when she left her screen open, and when she traveled, she checked in less frequently than she used to. I am not a confrontational person by impulse. I am a problem solver, and the problem in front of me required information before it required action. So I did something I never imagined I would do. I hired a private investigator. His name was Terry Oakes. I found him through a referral from a lawyer friend who handled some contract work for one of my clients. He was unremarkable in appearance, in a way that I imagine is professionally useful. He drove a beige Camry and had a handshake that was precisely calibrated to inspire confidence without demanding attention. We met at a Panera Bread off the interstate, and I laid out what I had. He listened without expression and then said, "Give me 30 days. It took him 19. He called me on a Tuesday morning and asked if I could come in that afternoon. I drove to his office, which was a single room above a State Farm agency, and he showed me what he had on a laptop screen. Photographs, dates and times stamped in the corner. Becca and a man I didn't recognize, together, in a parking garage in a hotel lobby at a restaurant I knew she liked in downtown Indianapolis. They had been meeting at least twice a month for the better part of 8 months. The man's name, Terry told me, was Boyd, mid-40s, divorced, worked in real estate development. He had met Becca through a mutual friend at a networking event. He drove a black Land Rover and liked to take her to a hotel near the convention center that billed itself as boutique. I thanked Terry Oakes. I paid him in cash. I drove home. I didn't cry. I want to note that not because I think it makes me stronger, but because I think it's honest. What I felt in that car was not sadness. It was something colder and cleaner. It was the feeling I get when I walk into a facility, identify the broken system, and shift into problem-solving mode. Something in me just clicked over. I did not confront Becca that evening. I made dinner. We watched a show. She kissed me goodnight, and I lay in the dark and thought about what I was going to do. The first thing I did was call my brother-in-law. Not Becca's brother. Mine. His name is Pete, and he is a family law attorney in Cincinnati who I have always liked and who has always liked me. I called him from a parking lot outside of Walgreens at 7 in the morning and told him what I had. There was a long pause on his end, and then he said, "I'm sorry, man. I really am. Come see me Thursday." I went Thursday. Pete walked me through everything. Ohio's divorce laws, asset division, how our joint business interests would be handled, what the timeline looked like. We had some complexity because Becca and I had co-signed a rental property 6 years earlier that had gone up significantly in value. We'd also co-invested in a friend's startup that had recently become worth something real. Pete told me not to move anything yet. He told me to document, be patient, and not tip my hand. I came home and I was patient. For 6 weeks, I was patient. I cooked dinner. I asked about her day. I walked our dog, a beagle named Clover, that Becca had gotten 3 years earlier and that I had, predictably, ended up taking care of almost entirely. Clover and I had developed an understanding. She sat on my feet while I worked. I fed her on time and took her on long walks, and she never once bit anyone who deserved it, which is more than I can say for most people. During those 6 weeks, I moved quietly. I consulted a financial advisor separately from our joint accounts. I had the rental property independently appraised. I reviewed the startup investment paperwork and found something interesting, a clause I'd barely registered when we signed, which gave me specific rights in the event of a dissolution of the partnership. I talked to the founder, a college friend of mine named Leo, and explained the situation off the record. Leo, to his credit, handled it professionally. And then I waited for the right moment. It came on a Thursday night in May. Becca texted me at 6:30 to say she was running late with a client and wouldn't be home until 9 or 10. I knew from the pattern and from what Terry Oakes had documented that she wasn't with a client. I also knew she was 45 minutes away at that boutique hotel near the convention center. I didn't drive there. I didn't need to. I had what I needed. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of bourbon and I called Connor. This was the part I had been dreading more than anything, not confronting Becca, not the legal process, telling my sons. Connor picked up on the second ring. He could hear something in my voice immediately. He's like that. Before I'd said 10 words, he asked, "Dad, what's wrong?" And I told him, "Not everything. Enough." I told him his mother and I were separating, that it was not something either of us had decided overnight, and that whatever happened between us had nothing to do with how we felt about him or his brother. He was quiet for a long time, and then he said, "Did she cheat on you?" I told him yes. He said, "Does Ash know?" I told him not yet. He said, "I'll tell him. Tonight. You shouldn't have to do that alone, and you shouldn't have to do it twice." And that, right there, that was the moment I did cry. Not for my marriage, for my son, who at 20 years old handled something that would have broken most adults with more grace and steadiness than I deserved. Ash called me 2 hours later. He was angrier than Connor, the way he tends to be. He said some things about his mother that I didn't correct, and also didn't encourage. He asked if I was okay. I told him I would be. He said, "You better be. Call me tomorrow." I called him tomorrow. When Becca came home at 9:15 that night, I was still at the kitchen table. She walked in and immediately knew something was wrong. She set her bag down and looked at me and said, "Hex, what happened?" I told her to sit down. I laid out what I had calmly and without embellishment. The fuel receipt, Terry Oaks. The photographs, the 8 months. The hotel, the man with the Land Rover. I set a folder on the table with printed photos inside, and I pushed it toward her, and I didn't say anything else. She didn't deny it. That's the thing that still sits with me. She didn't deny it. She looked at the folder for a long moment, and then she looked at me, and what I saw on her face was not guilt exactly. It was more like the expression of someone who's been running a project they thought was under control and just realized the audit is happening now. Today, without warning, she said she was sorry. She said it had started as something she told herself was nothing. She said Boyd didn't mean anything to her and that she loved me and that she hadn't wanted to hurt me. She said all the things people say. I listened to all of it. Then I told her I wanted a divorce. She went very still. Then she said she didn't think we needed to go that far. She said we could go to counseling. She said our life together was worth fighting for. She said, and this is the part I've thought about many times since, you don't throw away 20 years over a mistake. I told her, I'm not throwing away 20 years. You did that. I'm just cleaning up the paperwork. The next morning, I drove to Pete's office and filed. What followed was the part of the story that people who haven't been through a divorce don't fully understand. The paperwork is one thing, the logistics are another. Becca and I had a house, a rental property, a joint investment, shared accounts, a dog, and 2 adult children who were navigating something painful. Every single one of those things required decisions. She hired a lawyer, a sharp one, out of Columbus, who had a reputation for being aggressive in asset negotiations. Her first move was to contest the rental property valuation and argue that my independent appraisal was biased. Her lawyer sent a letter suggesting that certain business decisions I'd made during the marriage regarding our investment in Leo's startup had disadvantaged her financially, and that she would be seeking compensation. I found that interesting, because what Becca's lawyer apparently didn't know, and what Becca herself may have forgotten, or perhaps never fully read, was that when Leo's company incorporated, I had taken equity in a slightly different structure than Becca. She had invested cash. I had invested both cash and the specific advisory contribution that the incorporation documents defined separately. That structure, for reasons that had seemed purely administrative at the time, meant that my stake in the company was classified differently at dissolution. Pete had caught this immediately when we went through the paperwork. It meant that in the event of a marital split, my portion of that investment was categorized under a different legal framework than Becca's portion. In plain language, she got her cash investment back at current value. The advisory equity I'd accumulated, which had grown considerably more, remained mine. When her lawyer figured this out, Becca called me directly. She bypassed the attorneys entirely. She called my cell at 8 in the morning on a Thursday and said, in a voice I hadn't heard from her before, something between controlled and frantic, "Did you know about this when we invested?" I told her honestly, no. Pete found it when we started this process. "And you just kept it?" "It was already mine, Becca. I didn't take anything from you." She hung up. 20 minutes later, she called back and her voice had changed again. She said, "Boyd ended things 2 weeks ago. I want you to know that." I told her I appreciated her telling me. She said, "Do the boys hate me?" I told her they were working through it, which was true. She said, "I'm sorry, Hex. I really am. I know that doesn't fix anything." I told her I believed her and that it didn't fix anything. I told her I believed her and that it didn't fix anything. We finalized the divorce 8 months after I filed. The rental property was split cleanly based on a mutually agreed appraisal. The house sold, we got a strong offer in September, and we both signed without drama. The proceeds were divided per Pete's structure. Clover came with me, which was not even a conversation. She'd been sleeping at the foot of my bed for 2 years. The idea of her going anywhere else would have been genuinely absurd. The boys handled it the way young men from stable homes handle painful things, imperfectly, slowly, with occasional backslides, but ultimately with their heads up. Connor came home for a long weekend in October and helped me move into an apartment in the short north neighborhood of Columbus, close to work, close to good coffee, a block from a park where Clover could run. He assembled my IKEA bookshelf, ate half a pizza, and said, "This place is actually pretty nice, Dad. You're going to be okay." Ash texted me a week later. "Just, you good?" I said yes. He sent back a thumbs up, and then, after a pause, a second text. "Mom called me. She sounds rough." I told him to be good to her. He said he was trying. There are a few things I kept that people might find petty. I kept the parking spot at the rental property that was technically assigned to the unit Becca managed. We designated it informally as hers, but the lease paperwork had never been updated. When we divided the property management responsibilities in the settlement, that parking assignment reverted to my unit designation. She'd been using it to store some patio furniture she was temporarily keeping there during the transition. 2 weeks after the divorce was final, I had a property management company take over my unit, and they moved the furniture to the storage area per standard protocol. She texted me, "Did you clear out my stuff from the parking spot?" I texted back, "The property manager followed standard assignment protocols. Your unit has the storage area." She didn't respond. I also held on to something I've never told anyone until now. Early in our marriage, years before any of this, Becca and I had put a small collection of jewelry into a joint safety deposit box at our bank. Most of it was hers. Some of it was shared. But one piece, a bracelet that had belonged to my grandmother, which my mother had given me before she passed, was in that box. When we divided the box contents in the settlement, there was a brief dispute over a ring that Becca claimed I'd given her as a gift. The ring was in question. In the interest of moving things along, Pete agreed to let her keep the ring. What she didn't know was that the ring in the box was a copy. I'd had the original appraised and replaced with a quality replica 2 years earlier when I had the real one cleaned and reset. The original is in a small velvet box in my desk drawer. I'm not planning to give it to anyone, it's just mine. I've been living in Columbus for a little over a year now. Clover has a dog door and a favorite patch of sun near the kitchen window. I've taken on 2 new logistics clients. One is a mid-sized brewery doing a major facility expansion, which is genuinely interesting work. And one is a family-owned auto parts manufacturer trying to modernize their supply chain before the next generation takes over. I've gotten better at cooking. I finally finished reading the Patrick O'Brian novels I've been working on for 3 years. I still think about my marriage, not with bitterness mostly. The early years were good. They were real. Becca was the person I built a life with, and we built something worth being proud of. Our boys, our home, 20 years of a working partnership that produced more than it cost. The last chapter was ugly, and I won't pretend otherwise. But I'm not defined by the last chapter. Connor came to visit last month. We took Clover to the park and got sandwiches and sat on a bench watching her chase a squirrel with 0 chance of catching it. He said, "You seem like yourself again, Dad." I asked him what he meant. He said, "For a while you were running on like reserve power, like a phone at 4%. Now you seem charged." I told him that was a pretty good description. He said his mother was seeing a therapist and seemed to be doing better, steadier. He said Ash had had a long dinner with her last week and it had gone well. I was glad to hear it. I don't carry any satisfaction in her struggling. I only ever wanted the life we were supposed to have, and when that turned out not to be the life I was actually in, I wanted out cleanly and on my terms. I got out cleanly. I got out on my terms. And Clover is asleep on my feet right now, which means everything essential is in order. I've thought a lot about what actually went wrong and when. Not in the way where you torture yourself with a timeline, but in the way where you're trying to understand a system that failed so you don't build the same one twice. Here's what I keep coming back to. Becca didn't become someone else overnight. She made a series of small choices, each one a little easier than the last because the previous one had gone unnoticed. That's how it works. Not a single catastrophic decision, but a long, quiet drift. One Thursday at a time, until she was somewhere she couldn't have imagined standing at the beginning. And I think if she's honest with herself, really honest, she knows that the unraveling started long before I found that receipt. I was just the last one to find out. What I'm most proud of isn't the equity clause or the parking spot or any of the tactical things I handled cleanly, even though I handled them cleanly. What I'm most proud of is that I didn't lose myself in it. I've watched people go through divorce and come out the other side as a smaller version of who they were. Angrier, harder, more guarded, permanently defined by the injury. I refused to let that happen. Not because I'm especially strong, because I made a deliberate decision every single day for about 8 months to stay focused on what I could control and let go of what I couldn't. That's not a talent. That's a practice. And it doesn't come naturally to anyone. Connor said something to me early on that I wrote down and kept. He said, "Don't let her turn you into someone you wouldn't recognize." He's 20 years old. I don't know where he learned that, but I'm glad one of us knew it at the time. Ash, who runs Hotter, had to find his way to the same place by a different route, through anger first, then through a long dinner with his mother that I wasn't there for and didn't need to be. Both of them got there. That matters more to me than any asset in the settlement, the thing about integrity. And I mean the real kind, not the bumper sticker kind. Is that it only counts when it costs you something. It's easy to be the bigger person when there's nothing on the line. Becca's lawyer pushed hard on several things that I could have fought dirty and won faster. I didn't. Not because I was being noble. Because I knew that how I handled this would outlast the paperwork, and I wanted to be able to look my sons in the eye in 10 years without explaining anything. I think the truest thing I know about a life well lived is this: the decisions you make when you're hurt and angry, and the outcome is uncertain. Those are the ones that actually build your character. Everything else is just biography. Anyone can behave well when things are going fine. The measure of a person is what they do when they've been genuinely wronged, and the temptation to respond in kind is real and available. I had that temptation. I felt it clearly. I chose differently. Clover is still asleep on my feet. I still read late and cook better than I used to, and take on work that interests me. The boys are good. The life is smaller in some ways, and cleaner in all the ways that matter. That's enough. That's more than enough.